Hello there. So in my last video we had a discussion over anaerobic respiration. In this video I'm going to discuss basics of aerobic respiration and one of the reaction that is involved in an aerobic respiration. So let us start discussing the details of aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration. So very quickly, as we have already discussed, that aerobic respiration is the type of respiration which occurs in the presence of oxygen. So here the oxygen is going to be present, right? And it is the one where complete oxidation is going to happen of respiratory substrate. So respiratory substrate, they are going to get completely oxidized here. Now this whole aerobic respiration, it actually been divided into different phases. So the very first step is, if you remember, it has to be glycolysis, since glycolysis is the common pathway for aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration. So very first step is going to be glycolysis. Now another step after glycolysis, the second step is something known as acetylation. After that, the next phase will come, that is known as Krebs cycle. This Krebs cycle is also known as citric acid cycle. And it is also the one that is known as tricarboxylic acid cycle. Tricarboxylic acid cycle. So it is also known as TCA, tricarboxylic acid cycle. And ultimately after that, something known as electron transport system going to happen. It is also known as electron transport chain. So one and same thing, system or chain. So it is either ETS or ETC, the abbreviation for electron transport system or electron transport chain. So the whole aerobic respiration is divided into these 4 different phases. One thing, please remember that since this acetylation reaction is coming in between glycolysis and Krebs cycle, and it is considered as a link between glycolysis and Krebs cycle. So this process, it is also known as link reaction, just because it is linking glycolysis process to Krebs cycle. So acetylation is also known as link reaction. Now another thing that you need to remember, that what are the sites for these 4 different phases, right? So site for glycolysis, the very first step of aerobic respiration, it is, we have already seen this as well, that it is cytoplasm. For acetylation reaction or the link reaction, the site will remain mitochondrial matrix. Mitochondrial, it happens inside the mitochondria, that too in mitochondrial matrix. Okay, for the Krebs cycle, it is the same as that of acetylation reaction. So this Krebs cycle also going to take place in mitochondrial matrix. And this electron transport system is present in inner membrane of the mitochondria. So it is present in inner membrane of the mitochondria. As mitochondria has 2 membrane, it is a double membranous cell organelle. So the ETS is present in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, right? So let me give you a just brief idea before proceeding or going into the detail of aerobic respiration. You should just have a clear picture in your mind that actually what is happening in aerobic respiration, because it is a complex process, right? So what is happening, let's say this is the mitochondria. So let me draw a mitochondria over here. Right, so it is a double membranous organelle. So this is the outer membrane here, and I'm going to draw the inner membrane now. And the inner membrane is not smooth as the outer membrane, so it will be like this. Right, so this is the inner membrane here, and so this is the mitochondria, and this whole inner part is the matrix region of the mitochondria, and this is the inner membrane and this is the outer membrane, right? And so if this is a mitochondria, the whole outside part will be the cytoplasm part. So this is the cytoplasm, or you can say the cytosol part, and this is your mitochondria. Let me just write it here, mitochondria. Right, now what is happening in the case of aerobic respiration? In the case of aerobic respiration, the very first step is your glycolysis, and glycolysis is occurring in the cytoplasm only. So here glucose is getting converted into pyruvic acid, right? So this is your process of glycolysis. So once this glycolysis is done, this pyruvic acid now is going to enter in the mitochondria. So this pyruvic acid is entering in the mitochondrial matrix, and here this pyruvic acid is going to get converted into something known as acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA. And this process, the conversion of pyruvic acid to acetyl-CoA, is known as your acetylation. So this is acetylation, or the link reaction that we have just talked about, right? Acetylation. Now once this acetyl-CoA has been formed, now this acetyl-CoA is going to enter into something known as Krebs cycle. So here Krebs cycle is going to occur, right? Now during all these processes we are going to get something, right? In cell there is formation of something, and that something is that if I talk about precisely about the glycolysis process, we have seen that the net gain was 2 ATP. So here ATP is being formed. ATP is being formed through glycolysis process, as well as through glycolysis only what is being formed? NADH was being formed, the coenzyme, or the reduced coenzyme, I must say, right? So NADH was also being formed during glycolysis process. Just like that, if during acetylation reaction also the NADH is going to get produced, and also during Krebs cycles some amount of ATP is being produced, and also during Krebs cycle NADH is going to get produced, and also something known as FADH2 is going to get produced. Okay, now just understand this in such a way that let's say your ATP is cash. ATP is cash, okay, and your NADH and FADH2, these are the amount only, but it is in the form of cash. Sorry, it is in the form of check. Okay, now if you have something as cash and if you have something as check, and you go to certain shop in order to buy something, what would you give to the shopkeeper? Of course, cash, right? So you can just use that cash at that point, but you cannot use this, although this is your amount only, but it is something that is actually in the form of check. So you, what you need to do, you will have to, convert it into cash first in order to utilize it. Just like that, in order to utilize these NADH, FADH2, which are high energy molecule, ultimately the cell has to get converted into ATP in order to gain something out of them, right? So this NADH or FADH2, whatever is being produced during all these Krebs cycle or the glycolysis process, they now are going to enter into something. They are now going to, this one also are going to enter into something known as ETS, ETS, that is your electron transport system or the electron transport chain, that is present in the inner mitochondrial membrane, membrane. And ultimately, once this NADH and FADH2 they enter in this ETS, they now will ultimately, after the process of electron transport chain or system, ultimately we are going to get ATP. How? We will see into the details very soon, but this is the basic thing. This is just to give you a basic idea that actually what is happening in this electron transport chain or the electron transport system, why it is happening. It is happening because whatever amount was there in the form of check with you, you have to convert it into in the form of cash in order to utilize. Just like that, cell, what is it doing? It is converting these NADH, FADH2 in ATP ultimately in order to utilize it in any any function, right? So this is what is happening in this is the basic picture of aerobic respiration. The very first step is glycolysis. Second step is acetylation, which is also known as link reaction. Third is Krebs cycle. Now during all this process, whatever NADH, FADH2 are being produced, they are going to get converted into ATP during electron transport system. So this is the basic picture for aerobic type of respiration. Now, in order to proceed, you should first know that here we are going to utilize two things, or the ATP. Since we are forming, ultimately the ultimate goal of respiration is to form ATP. The ATP formation is also known as phosphorylation. And this phosphorylation, that is the production of ATP from ADP plus inorganic phosphate. So this phosphorylation process can occur in two types during cellular respiration. The very first one is substrate level phosphorylation. And the next one is oxidative type of phosphorylation. So oxidative phosphorylation. So what must be happening in substrate level phosphorylation? During substrate level phosphorylation, as the name suggests, what happens, it is a reaction that results in the production of ATP by the transfer of phosphate group from a substrate directly to ATP. Means a substrate is actually giving out this phosphate group, and this phosphate group is being added directly into the ADP in order to form ATP. So this is substrate level phosphorylation. But in the case of oxidative phosphorylation, what is happening? Ultimately, the oxygen will be utilized. There is oxidation reaction happening. Oxygen will be utilized and ATP will be formed through electron transport system. So this is known as oxidative phosphorylation. Okay. In the case of oxidative phosphorylation, the metabolic pathway, it is a metabolic pathway in which cells use enzyme to oxidize nutrients, and ultimately the energy is being produced in the form of ATP. So this is oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so you need to keep it in your mind because both the type we are going to utilize in upcoming processes, the substrate level phosphorylation as well as oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, now let us just quickly go with start with aerobic respiration. So if you remember that aerobic respiration, the very first step was glycolysis, and we are already done with glycolysis process. So at the end of glycolysis process, we have pyruvic acid, right? So at the end of the end product of glycolysis process was pyruvic acid. Now the next step was the acetylation reaction or the link reaction. So next step is acetylation reaction or the link reaction. Now what is happening? During glycolysis, that was the first step of aerobic respiration. Already the one molecule of glucose has been converted into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. So this was the end product of glycolysis, that is pyruvic acid. Now this pyruvic acid undergoes 2 reactions simultaneously. What is it? It is going to go decarboxylation, that is removal of CO2, and also here NAD plus is going to get converted into NADH plus H plus. And since 2 molecules of pyruvic acid are there, so 2 molecules of CO2, one from each molecule of pyruvic acid are going to get removed, and also 2 molecules of NAD plus are going to get converted into 2 molecules of NADH, and ultimately forms something known as acetyl. Now this acetyl is not very much stable in the cells, so in order to make it stabilize, it add on or takes help of coenzyme A and ultimately form acetyl CoA. Okay, so here since 2 molecules of pyruvic acid was there, 2 molecules of acetyl CoA is being formed during link reaction, and all these things are happening under the enzyme, under the function of enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. And actually this is a whole complex, pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. It includes a lot of things like it includes a lot of component like it has lipoic acid in it. It has something known as decarboxylase enzyme. Since decarboxylation is happening, also it has something known as trans-acetylase, and also here magnesium ions plus something known as TPP, that is thymine pyrophosphate, is being involved. Okay, so during acetylation, what is happening? 2 molecules of pyruvic acid are getting converted into 2 molecules of acetyl CoA. And this link reaction, if you remember, the site for link reaction is, we have just discussed it, it is mitochondrial matrix, right? And during this process, what we are getting, we have got 2 molecules of NADH. So this was about acetylation or the link reaction. So second step is already done. In my next video, I'm going to talk about Krebs cycle and then electron transport system in order to cover this whole aerobic respiration process. So stay tuned and I'll see you in the next video. Hope you like the video. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.